I'm Luke. I'm going to be your moderator. This panel is going to be talking about professionalism in online communication. For that, we have Dan Christofferson.
Christopherson. Dan Kriss is what I usually go by.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's right on there. Sorry, and then Brendan Cass. So if you guys would like to introduce yourselves a little bit more than that, and then start talking about like what does it mean to be professional in our communication?
What is it? Professional. Jeez, that's a loaded question. All right. Yeah, I'm Brendan Cass. I am an owner of Skirmisher Publishing, and yeah, typically when it comes to communicating with folks online, that ends up coming to me. Because I've done quite a bit of that in my professional career. And so what does that mean, professional communication? To me, that ends up meaning in a lot of cases, recognizing that you've got a lot of emotional stake in what you're doing, because most people who design or publish or sell games are doing it, if not just for the money. This is a sort of a passion thing for a lot of them. So you're bringing a lot of emotion to the table, and you got to realize that that emotion is only going to hurt you in online communications if there's a bit of a confrontation. People aren't going to see it. They're not going to be as patient with you as someone might be if you left that emotion out. So I would say you definitely want to come across understanding that these are people who want to get something good out of what you're producing, and want to enjoy what they're getting. I mean, there's exceptions to this. There are people who are really just deliberately out to make grief, but I don't think that's the most of them.
About 1 or 2 per Kickstarter.
Yeah, sure, right, yeah. So those people do exist, and I guess we can get into how you would handle those people in particular. I don't think I don't think it helps you to assume that they're going to be those kinds of people, because by and large, if you are able to come at it from the perspective of someone who's trying to make a situation right, despite all of the emotions involved, you can probably do that, and people can walk away from any given situation more or less happy. Obviously, with some exceptions.
Oh yeah, there's always exceptions. I am Dan Kriss for this huge, wonderful turnout we have here. This has got to be the largest crowd I've ever seen. It's a huge crowd. So, no.
It's the biggest.
The biggest. We have the biggest crowds. We'll use the best words too.
Yeah, we do use the best words.
Just the long words.
Long words.
Yeah,
Yes.
masters.
Not yeah. So I publish board and tabletop games, or as I like to think of them, tabletop experiences. And I also agree with Brendan. It's very important to, be very metered in what you're saying. Always take the time to think about what you're going to say. And if you feel passionate about what you're about to reply, and honestly, it doesn't really matter if you're really angry or even really excited.
Sure.
Take a minute.
Yeah.
Think about it. Sleep on it if you have to. Drink on it if you must. And then sleep on it.
Don't hit send when you've been drinking on
no.
it.
Don't hit send when you've been drinking on it.
Whiskey and email do that.
No. Do not good bedfellows make. No, they do not. So, but remember that everything you put out there, that customer is number one, first of all, a customer of yours. There's someone that at least noticed your product.
Right.
And cared enough to write you.
That's
Even
true.
if they're telling you, hey, your product's trash and I
Right.
hate it, they at least know who you are, right?
Yep.
So that's a start. Now you have the chance to possibly change their opinion, and it could be for weal or woe.
Yeah.
And so whatever falls out of your mouth or keyboard at that moment will then have that effect. And so it's very important.
Yeah. You make a good point, I think, because there's a possibility that whatever you've made, and if somebody's not happy with what you've made and leaves a comment to that effect, that you can never get them to your side of seeing things. In fact, I will say this, don't ever try to get someone over to your side of seeing things. It's going to come across as defensive. Defensive never looks good online. People got no patience for it. They'll eat you alive.
Oh yeah.
So don't try to defend it. You're not going to win. Unfortunately, the best case scenario when someone's aggrieved with a product and is leaving, sending nasty messages or review or whatever, the best thing you can do is, if not win them over on the product, then with your demeanor, win them over on you, right? So maybe that one game you made, that's not the one for them. But at least they know Dan Kriss Games, good people.
Yeah.
At least I know it's good people, and good people counts for a lot. I think it's pretty safe to say that people want to buy and support from good people. So if you can at least show that you're a good person, you can take criticism in a graceful way, that they'll come back. And if maybe that person will come back, but if you're leaving it, especially in a public forum, if you're responding to a review, this is a sort of marketing for yourself, for your brand, for your company. Other people are seeing your interaction. They know, well, okay, what if I'm not happy with something I buy? How are they going to treat me? Am I going to be treated like crap, or are they going to treat me well? And if they see that there's a good interaction there, then they know, oh, okay, I feel a little bit safer buying from these people. Maybe they were on the edge, with your company. Yeah, seem a lot more approachable. And people do want, I think, to feel safe when they're approaching your stuff and communicating with you, and knowing that they're being heard, and that you aren't just going to try to defend, whatever, and shut out their opinion.
Yeah.
So earlier you alluded to the idea that one or two people might just be overly belligerent. So what point do you kind of identify someone as being of that type, and then what is your response? Would you just ignore them, or what do you recommend doing?
Well, I've had a number of situations on Kickstarter in the past where, someone just all of a sudden decided to take issue with something that had nothing to necessarily do with anything, but just decided they wanted to, write me and be like, oh, you're not doing this right, or there's a problem, or whatever it might be, and be really nasty about it, like, oh, you were supposed to deliver last week, and I haven't got my package in the mail yet, so I'm demanding a ×3 refund, and you get people that are really just looking for something for nothing.
Sure.
Not very often. That's not usually the case. It's usually 1 or 2 out of 1,000, or like at least 1 out of a few hundred, But it will happen. There will generally always be one. And really the best thing you can do is just, within reason, just give them what they want. Say, look, hey, sorry you feel that way. How can I help make this better? And then send them on their way, Don't leave them with any ammunition against you.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the first thing they will gladly use, and they're looking for it. But if you leave them feeling like, oh, they're not a bad guy, I shouldn't post that nasty thing I wanted to say about them, then you've already won, because they haven't put up something that will be up there permanently.
Yeah.
They're not vying for popularity on the internet, but you as an online publisher and as a publisher, you are definitely vying for popularity every second, every day, every word you say, every video that you recorded in, every viral thing. Like if you're standing on a street corner yelling at some poor lady, and someone's standing there with a cell phone, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, but someone's standing there with a cell phone.
Why are you looking at me?
Like you're the only one here.
I wasn't going to say that.
The only ones here.
Yeah.
All of
You're the only one here that matters.
Massive.
All these other people
They
are
don't.
useless.
It's like they're not even here.
I know. I can't even see them. But in the end, like everything you do online or in any recorded anywhere is there forever. Permanent record now.
Yeah.
There is no getting around it, no getting away from it. As a matter of fact, I still have my own little permanent record on Board Game Geek. When we put out Tavern Masters, we had some of the art has, women dressed as wenches, because that's a part of the thing, that they work at the tavern. Now there are other women in the game and they're wearing perfectly normal clothes. And we don't have that whole thing where, oh, here's a woman in armor, but it's basically a metal bikini. No, none of that stuff. The Tavern Masters is part of a world that is actually very progressive and very gender balanced, across the board. But because it had women in wench outfits, and some of them were painted in a way where it was a little like, very, very low cut, or very high cut for skirts, which wasn't even how I planned it. I didn't paint the art myself, but I'm not going to sit there and throw my artist under the bus, but a couple of people were complaining. It wasn't even actually females, surprisingly. It was actually males. But they were complaining about how we had depicted our women because they seemed to think that one or two pieces of art suggested how the whole thing went. And it was late at night. I was really stressed out because the Kickstarter was a Kickstarter, and and everything else going on. And so I was like, look, we're not trying to offend anyone here. I'm really sorry if you were offended, but this is a world where they can wear what they want. And why should you judge them? Like, they're their own characters. In my mind, they exist in their own world. It's not me assigning something to them, even though technically speaking it is. But that did not go over well. That went over as well as a lead balloon. And so everyone was just like, you sexist pig, and blah, 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 attacked me. And then after that, I tried to say, like, look, I know I might have come off a little bit like aggressive or defensive, but you have to understand this game means a lot to me, and I in no way made anything in there to be sexist or degrading or to look down on anybody. If anything, I believe in the approach that the creator of the IT Crowd and some other shows like Father Ted and Black Books, he takes the approach where all the characters are just as equally likely to do something stupid and silly.
Sure.
Because it's a comedy. So you don't have like the woman there like saying, "Oh, you silly men," while the men are in the background doing a bunch of stupid things.
Sure.
Shooting themselves in the head with nail guns. Everybody is there for being on parody.
Right.
And so I try to take that approach, but you still have to be careful because there's still a lot of people out there that use certain parody to try and promote their own negative agendas.
Right.
So you have to be wary of what you put out there, but at the same time, you have to balance that out between letting public opinion control your creativity versus, so. I hope I explained that as much as I want to.
Yeah. Well, you can always add to it. So I've had situations where a lot of times these things will turn up in reviews. So situations that I've struggled with. You try to stay as professional as you can, and being human, people are able to get under your skin. In particular, a pet peeve of mine is when someone will negatively review a thing for what it isn't. Well, I don't tend to claim that a thing is something that it isn't. I tend to tell people exactly what it is you're getting in the box, as it were. And so when you buy a candy bar and give it 1 star because it's not ice cream, I tend to think that's on you. So that's my pet peeve. Really, really irritates me. And I know that. I know that that's a hot button sort of review for me. And you get them. And sometimes you have to know what your own triggers are. And, I don't know what motivates people to leave a review like that. I don't know. I just don't. So,
Bad childhood.
Maybe bad childhood. I don't know. But I will say this. Here's my point. This is the reason why I'm saying this. If you know that you have a trigger like that, or a sort of professionalism blind spot, sometimes just don't try to force it. I'm not saying ignore them. Maybe you need to walk away for a while before you can come back to that. Or there's a lot of people that you probably know, right? It's okay to draft an email and pass it in front of them, right? You want to ask people who aren't just going to say yes, right? Oh, yeah, no, you're the best man, so I know whatever you say is fine. Those people aren't really going to help you. You need to know people who can tell you no. And you can pass that email or response drafted up in front of them and ask them what tone is coming across here. Because if it's one of those things that are going to trigger you, you're not even going to know it. And you probably didn't know it. When I responded to these things, I didn't know it. When I was writing my response, I didn't know I was kicking the beehive, But you know, you learn from situations like this. Hopefully you listen to what we're saying. You learn before you even do it, right? But odds are you'll kick the behind yourself. And you pass it in front of people, you get their take on it. And I think you asked, you made a key statement. A lot of times the gist is, what can I do to make it right? And if their response is it's usually going to be a lot of words, it's usually going to be really ranty, but if the gist of their response is, there's nothing you can do to make it right, I'm just out to be aggrieved. Some people are. If that's the case, then sometimes you have to just take the loss and walk away from it, because you know sometimes there is no bring them over to your side. The only thing you can do is not look like a huge jerk to the rest of your community, because you don't want to give them that impression, because odds are you're not a huge jerk. Odds are you've just been goaded into a situation that's tough for you, right? So sometimes it's okay to walk away. I mean, it's a balance like anything else. If you're that designer that consistently ignores negative things and there's just a wall of them and you've never done anything to address them, yeah, that reflects on you, right? So these are the jerks who, people don't like things and they just leave it. But sometimes you don't have to respond directly, and I think this would be my final point. Sometimes you don't need to respond directly to a person. Sometimes you can implicitly respond to a person. There are enough people leaving a certain negative feedback, and this is something that you can take action on, and you don't feel like it compromises your product or your vision. You can take action to correct that thing and make a public statement that, hey, we've heard from people that this is a problem, and we've done something about it. You don't have to mention any names. But those people who made that comment, they're going to see, well, I made that comment. They'll know. They'll be satisfied. And everybody else in the world probably won't even know about the person who left the original comment, but they'll see this is a person who's responsive to their customers' needs, and that reflects well on you. So it's not even necessarily a direct response. You can do indirect responses to a problem that it makes sort of more people happy. And it's not direct, it's not personal, so people aren't going to get their feelings hurt, or they shouldn't anyway. Unless you make the thing worse, I guess. Like, I'm going to take that thing and I'm just going to turn it up to 11.
Yeah.
Which might be your goal, I don't know.
Well, it might
some
be.
people out there are just, in it to...
Well, but it's like you say, you can win people over, even if you don't win them over to your cause, you can at least, or to your product, you can at least win them over to your cause. Like, for instance, when I had the game Cthulhu, the Great Old One, we did on Kickstarter, and we had some trouble with fulfillment, because by the time all the costs had come in for manufacturing, we didn't have enough left for all the shipping, and so I had to pull that out of pocket and whatnot. And a couple of people complained, but I tried to explain it to everybody, and most everyone understood. There was a few people in particular who were like, look, this is, I believed in you, and you kind of let me down here, and I think this is just despicable and whatnot, and you shouldn't treat people like that. So I could have been upset. I was, of course, very hurt. You can't help but have emotional feelings, unless you're a sociopath, I guess. But, so I was very hurt, and I felt really terrible for letting them down. But at the same time, I'd already been going through a lot of stuff getting to that point too, so it just kind of added fuel to the fire. But I tried to say, okay, look, I can't blame them for being upset at something I made a promise to them, and I'm not able to fulfill at the moment. Like, they were expecting me to be able to just ship it right away, but ran into problems, so now I'm going to take some time. So I sat down and I wrote them. I was like, look, I'm very sorry about this. This was not the plan, and I tried to explain things to them. And honestly, I said, look, I'll tell you what, if you'd like, I'll be glad to give you a refund as soon as I can, spare the money out of my pocket, which was quickly, and I'll even still send you a copy too as soon as I can afford to. And they were all pretty much like, wow, really? Like, you know what? Take the time you need.
Sure.
And even one of them was like, I'll be honest, like, you're not as big of a company as I thought you were, and so I don't think I could ever support you again in a Kickstarter. But, I know that you're trying your best, and so I don't have any hard feelings against you. So just send me the refund, and if you want to send me the copy, great. but I mean, I'm not gonna say bad stuff happened. I'm not gonna accuse you anymore. But I just went back here. Well, hey, that was still a positive outcome, because even if I might not have made another sale or whatever, that's not the main important thing. The main important thing is, being the person you set out to be first and foremost, being the kind of company you set out to be first and foremost. I think that's just my opinion, but and courtesy does not cost anything.
Sure.
Except maybe every once in a while a tiny bit of pride, and pride ain't worth anything when it comes to
Not in this industry.
taking care of other people and taking people into account.
That's true.
So, but even a lot of the things we've been talking about have been dealing with problems, but honestly, I feel it's just as important
It's true.
to just always be courteous anyway,
Sure.
and it needs to be genuine. Like, you can't just fake genuineness. I mean, of course, everyone has a bad day where they need an extra cup of coffee before they're really feeling themselves, and so you might not genuinely feel happy, but it still doesn't hurt. As long as you still are appreciative that they are your supporter or your client, your customer, your backer, or whatever, even your employee or your coworker, it never. It takes all of 5 seconds to type, "Hey man, have an awesome day," or keep up the awesome work. It doesn't matter whatever came before it. Just finish it off with, like, hey, like, I hope your day goes better or whatever, because it lets them know that they matter to you.
Sure.
So yeah.
So, I was going to ask, going kind of a little bit different direction.
Yeah.
In regards of professional communication between other professionals in that kind of field, what would you say is more important than simply beyond being merely curious, or the kind of response you would typically give to someone you're trying to that you have like a customer,
Yeah.
as opposed to showing that you are also a professional? And do you have any examples of perhaps someone, I mean, obviously you won't give any names, of course, but someone that you've communicated with that you were immediately turned away from them because they were not communicating professionally?
Actually, a great example.
Oh, yeah,
And I won't mention any names. But in this industry, you do end up working with a lot of professionals. In my case, I do a lot of work with folks who are doing work for hire. And a lot of cases, those end up being artists and authors and folks like that. And I will say that in professional communication, I can be, at least at first, maybe a little bit more sterile, and then warm up a little bit after that. But the reason why is just because extra words that sort of convey feeling tend to make things longer, right? So short and sweet can get you a really long way if you make your intent and needs clear right away. So working with folks who are doing work for you on contract, you don't need to be, I'll use the word that I like to use in this case, shysty. Okay, if you're trying to conceal information for some reason, ask yourself really why. Why are you trying to conceal this? People will pick up on that. So be clear in your intent. I think professionals really appreciate that. Nobody has the time to sort of get at what you really mean. So if you're working with an artist, hey, I'm looking for an image. These dimensions. This is the concept that I'm looking for. In color, and this is my budget. Can you work with that? Boom, done. Like, that doesn't take pages, and they can respond yes or no. I've found a lot of people who normally don't work at that budget level will work with you just because they can see that you're a person who's going to work easily with them. And part of that is say what you're going to do specifically, right? Short and sweet. Then do exactly that thing. If you have that 1-to-1 say-do ratio, everyone's going to love working with you.
Yeah.
Okay? And so you asked for a bit of a trouble scenario where things sort of fell apart. Okay. Sometimes you get approached by people who are looking to work for you, and I love that. 99% of the time. Occasionally you get the 1% of folks that aren't clear with exactly what they're looking to get, and they'll say that they're looking for something else because they think that's what you're going to say yes to. I will take a brief detour there. Don't say you're going to do one thing when you want another thing. Say what you want. If they say no, you can move on quicker to another person who might say yes than try to
Waffle it out.
yeah, and convince them to say yes to you for that thing. So in this case, it was an artist that wanted to do work for hire for us, and discuss some things about current projects, and the conversation ended up going in the direction of they started to send me completed works, which blindsided me. It's like, oh wow, you're sending me art now. What am I supposed to do with this? Well, their expectation was that I was going to start using it and then pay them for it. It's like, but I didn't ask for these images, and you're put in a really bad situation. What that guy did is, well, I had to feel guilty because they put this time in. I respect that they put in time. They're a professional that put in time to produce work, but I couldn't use it. But I felt this pressure to use it. So you may, if you do something like that, you may guilt them into using your stuff that one time, but I guarantee you they are never calling you back. It's not going to happen. It was a very off-putting situation for me in an otherwise okay encounter, but I started to receive things from them to pressure me into a relationship that I wasn't really ready to get there. Sounds a lot like, I don't know, weird dating situation. But yeah, I guess this works for your personal life too. Don't guilt people into saying yes. That was something kind of negative that happened to me. But the only reason I bring up that story is because really sticking to a simple say what you want. You can even bullet it. You know, people like bullet points. You can bullet it,
Oh, yeah.
and then do the things that you say you're going to do. And if you do that, working with professionals, no problem. Just follow through, and you'll have great relationships with your peers.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Dan?
I definitely agree. Follow through is extremely important, and being very clear about your expectations. And like for instance, whenever I'm talking to a new artist or whatever for looking at a game, I don't, they'll say, "Hey, what's your budget?" Like, no, it's not about that. What do you charge? Here's what I want. I want this. I want this. I want this. I want to work for hire, and I want, here's what we're looking at in the grand scheme of things. Here's how much time we have to work with it, and I'm very flexible in time.
Yep.
I would start way early.
Yeah, right.
And I say, here's what I want. What do you want to make this happen? And then they tell me, and I don't haggle.
Yeah.
I do not haggle on art. I'm like, okay, it's either a yes or a no.
Right.
And that way, if they say yes, and then I pay them, and they do that, and they say, hey, I was unfairly treated, like, I don't know what you mean. I did everything you asked. I paid you what you asked. I paid you on time. I paid you in advance, whatever, So I went by your rules, so if anything was unfair to you, it was something you set up, not something I set up.
It's a great model.
Because I can always find another artist, no matter how perfect the art might look, I can always find another artist that can do it for presumably a more reasonable rate within a certain amount, a range of closeness, not to their look, but to just the general feel of what I'm going for.
Sure.
There's more fish in the sea, so to speak. So, it's easier for me to just say yes or no and move on, like you say, rather than, haggling with them.
Right.
Or letting them haggle with me. If they want to say, hey, I'll do it cheaper, like, well, but I thought you said your rates were this.
Sure. My assumption is always, just on the topic of art, is that any professional that says their rate is X, my assumption is you are absolutely worth that. The question is whether or not I have the money for it.
Right, unless they say, oh, well, I want this. And you're like, yeah, that art's not worth that. I will move on somewhere else.
Sometimes
That does
can
happen.
yes.
As much as I hate to say it, it
That is
can.
true, it can happen, yeah.
So,
problem with art too is if you haggle, you're not gonna get the best art.
Exactly,
Well, that-
exactly.
That's true.
If they're getting what they asked and they're getting it paid on time and they're happy, they're gonna do a lot better work.
That's true.
There's a great,
Unless they're just disorganized and wait till the last minute to rush
Yeah.
it all or something.
there's a great meme with a freelancer who people would ask him for free art, so we do these horrible pencil sketches.
This is what free looks like.
Oh, I
Yeah.
saw that the other day.
That was
That's
awesome.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's always something about, oh, you know, hey, I've got this great game idea, great exposure. Yeah,
People die of exposure.
That's
Yeah.
right, people die of exposure.
People die of exposure.
I always
That's fair.
prepay 100% for art
Oh yeah.
because I don't want, like you said, I don't want the guilt, and I never want to owe anyone money. And I just tell the artist, I say, look, you know, if you burn me, that answers the question for me. But if I prepay you in advance, that means I want your best art, you know.
See, I'm new to all this, and I just commissioned some art for the game book that we're working on. And she asked for half up front.
Okay.
And so that's what I did,
Yeah.
because, you know, in our discussion, she said, well, I had said, this is what I need. And she said, okay, I can do that for you. And she was very helpful. She's like, you know what kind of a bleed do you need? It's like, you asking questions I don't have answers for. And she said, okay, well, is it for, you know, publication, is it for print, or for online, or whatever? And I, you know, kind of explained to her everything that we were thinking of, hoping to do with it. She said, okay, I know I know where to go with this. I know how to work with this. And so she gave me a price. And I said, okay, it sounds pretty fair.
Yeah.
It may have been too much, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But she said, you know, give me half up front. So that's what I did, because that's what, I mean, I didn't say, you know, can I pay you half now
Yeah.
and pay, you know, like you were saying. It was just kind of in the upfront about it. It's like, you know, it's $500, and if you give me, you know, $250 up front, and I'll get to work on it, and I'll have it done for you in a few weeks, and we'll, you know. So I mean, so that's sort of the, you know, you're saying that you always pay up front, and I get that, you know.
I'm not saying you should.
Right.
Yeah, there's no standard contract.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
There's no standard contract. And if you walked away from that happy and she walked away from that happy,
Right.
I pay my artists after they're done. But I always pay them immediately after I get that invoice, right?
Right.
That's my deal.
Yeah.
Say do. I'll pay you, boom, you're paid, right? So I always pay them immediately after. My expectation is if you're a freelancer, you're probably juggling multiple gigs at the same time. So maybe paying up front might actually get me a little bit more expedited treatment. I could try that. But I assume they're also working on other things at the same time, and you know they'll get to mine when they're ready for it, and then I'll pay them. And
That is my understatement, I'm paying for priority.
well,
Right,
I
yeah.
can give that a shot.
You
Well-
said something that I keyed in on. Having done all the signage for the convention here, I know that it's not very much, but signs are expensive.
Yeah.
Art's expensive.
You did a good job of it.
But you said, you talked to the artist, and the artist is asking you about bleed and all this stuff, and you're like, I don't know. I have found it to be invaluable, I mean, just completely to learn at least the basics of that.
It does
You
hurt to
know,
do your research.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I was very fortunate that the graphic designer that we have is a friend of mine. I was like, I don't want to use you because I literally do not have money to pay you. And she's like, you are my friend and I love you and I want to do this for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do the bare minimum towards you because I don't want to take advantage of you. But with her, I could just say, okay, this is what I need. I need 18 by 24 inch signs that say these things that are going to go inside, you know, and she would send me the graphics already formatted specifically for the sizes I had called out. But then I needed to get them printed, so I went up to the print shop and I'm like, okay, so I need to have these printed out, I need them to be this size, and I need to talk mounting options. Not because I really know this stuff, but because you have to learn a little bit of it to make sure that you get what you want. So I would definitely recommend.
Yeah. It's
Artists
really
will
valuable.
appreciate that too.
Yeah.
I've
the
done.
print lady, I mean, she and I are best friends now because she was so appreciative of me knowing the right questions to
Yes.
ask.
Yeah.
When I do illustrations, I tell them I'd like a sketch in one layer, and then I tell them I want my background in another layer, and I want my character in another layer, and then the weapons and stuff in a separate layer. And by getting that, I'm able, and I purchase full rights. By by doing that, I can repurpose that art
Yes,
very
you can.
easily and
Yeah.
use it multiple times, and I get a lot more money out of my investment.
That's true.
Yeah, I definitely like at least having background and then the character and stuff
Yeah.
in the foreground, so you can,
You need
like,
it
if
for
you got a
marketing
separate
material.
character,
You
I
do
can put
need
in
it
like
for
a rule
marketing
book or
material.
something,
Yep.
you know?
Mhm.
You never
Yeah.
know what you're gonna slap that guy on, and you don't
Exactly.
want to be pixeling out a background.
I will use this pithy idiom on this topic as well. Just keep in mind that poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on their part.
Right.
Okay, so you can't get upset and abuse people just because you didn't plan things out right and you're down to the 9th hour on your Kickstarter and you need something, right?
Like my product sales mean I can't afford to pay you.
That's not
Not his
their
problem.
not their fault, not their problem. So say do. Just, you gotta follow through, man.
Yeah.
But if you find an artist where you've earned trust and
Yeah.
you've paid on time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
built that relationship, they'll be with you your whole career.
And the best part is they tend to grow with you as
Yeah.
well.
And the first rule of trust, just get it all in writing. Contract to begin with.
Agreed.
If you got a contract to begin with, then you both know you're on the same page and you can move on from there. I've learned in the past, it was hard lessons, but yeah, contract up front, and then you know what terms
Even
you're
if
on
they
and
love
everything
you.
else can be very peaceable. You know, and whether you're paying up front or paying in the end or paying a down payment, you know, that's one of the nice things about Fiverr for art is that you actually send the money to Fiverr,
Sure.
for instance, and then they
Sort
do
of
the
held in
art.
escrow.
They send the art to Fiverr, and once you approve it, then they release the funds to the artist and they take the watermark off your image, you know. And so, like, they act as a gatekeeper between you both to keep you up on your end of the agreement, and that's nice.
That's
That, you know,
It eliminates the risk.
right. Yeah, and it makes it very easy, but yeah, so.
So I guess one last quick question, unless if someone else has one, I can go ahead and field it. All right. Yeah. So I was wondering on again communication between professionals. How important would you guys say that knowing the industry's terminology is in order to not appear too amateurish, in order to make sure you actually are able to like effectively work together?
It's okay to admit you don't know stuff.
Yeah,
That's true.
that's the way to learn,
yeah.
for sure.
Don't all right. That's a good point. Don't pretend you know something. Okay. Don't pretend you know something to seem with it, and because you're worried that they're going to think less of you. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to do your due diligence. You're going to learn as you go along, but there's a lot of really great material out there. I mean, we're at a wonderful convention right now, but if you are interested in getting into the profession and want a sort of like crash course that's sort of consolidated into a few days, I really do recommend the Gamma Trade Show. They have a lot of panels which will get you up to speed on all of these terminologies, and so you'll be able to talk apples to apples. But odds are you're not going to know everything. You're going to sort of learn things as you go and make mistakes. Don't pretend you know something when you don't. You can admit fault, but also or admit ignorance. But you also just trust but verify when someone's supplying information to you in a professional situation. I'm not saying that everyone's going to try to fleece you, right? But when you get that information, it's on you. If you're really into getting into the industry, it's on you to take that information and really learn what it means, so that you can see what that means for you in that context.
Just stay away from the Gamma Executive Board meeting.
Gamma Executive Board meeting? Yeah. The panels are very good. You can go to those.
Well, and also know your audience too. I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, you could use all the big 25 and 50-cent words,
Sure could.
and if you're at like an alumni dinner,
Yeah.
that might be the place to do it. But if you're trying to explain something to someone who's obviously just likes keeping things simple and whatnot, like the more simpler terms you can use, the more likely and more apt they are to understand what you're talking about. I mean, in the end, communication is the not only the name of the game, it is the very basis of the practice.
That's right.
I mean, if I can best communicate an idea to you by tap dancing it on this table, then that's how I should communicate it to you. But I don't think any of us want any of that. So, and for now, we will suffice with words.
I pay to see.
But really, I mean, if I could communicate better to you by flashing colored lights or by playing music, then that's the method I should use. In the end, know your audience and know the best way to communicate your ideas efficiently and effectively to them, and then hope that they will do the same to you.
Right.
So that, communication can occur.
Right.
Proper intercourse, which is the correct word.
Right.
Even though,
Sounds great.
other things.
Yeah.
But if an artist says, "Do you need a bleed?" and you don't know what a bleed is, ask him.
They can
Yeah,
ask
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Totally true.
And it does, like you say, due diligence. I mean,
Due diligence.
when they were first telling me to send them files from Illustrator, and I'm very familiar with Photoshop,
Sure.
backwards and forwards pretty
Yeah.
much. But Illustrator was a whole new bag of worms to me. I mean, it's still Adobe, so it still had a lot of the things, but I had to learn about how to set the bleeds and how to deal with CMYK versus RGB. Very important printers out there. People putting out games and sending to printers know the difference between RGB and CMYK, because most printers want it in CMYK.
That's right.
And your files are probably RGB.
They'll convert it for you, and it'll come out wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It'll come out crazy.
Yeah.
So,
All
but
right.
yeah.
I guess with those final words of wisdom, we'll be ending this panel. Thank you guys very much for all that information.
Thank you so much. And what a lovely, huge crowd we've had. You've all been so wonderful.